Hi folks, Nat here from Living Entertainment. The world of hi-fi is changing and changing for the better, I believe. There is more streaming amplifiers on the market than there ever has been. And a couple of the latest ones that we've come across and played with in store are the Roksan Caspian 4G streaming amplifier and the Arcam SA35. I really wanted to run the Roksan through its paces, and we did that today with a couple of speakers. Let me tell you about it. Before I go into how the amplifier sounds, I want to talk about some of the specs and some of the features, because this amplifier isn't like a lot of other two-channel amplifiers. It's got some tricks up its sleeve and some really cool ones at that. Now let's start off with the power. That's the one that everyone wants to know, but funny enough, probably one of the more boring parts of this video. It's 105 watts at 8 ohms and it almost doubles up to 200 watts at 4 ohms. So it's got plenty of juice. It's got an inbuilt DAC. Roksan are calling it the Rapture DAC. There is lots of tech that's put into that, and certainly to my ears, I can hear that technology at play. It's got HDMI ARC. It's got a myriad of analog inputs. It's got digital coax. It's got optical. It's really got everything you want, and a phono stage as well, I should mention. Also worth mentioning that it's a Class AB amplifier topology. But really what I want to get into today is what all those inputs are capable of, and something that's not normally available on other amplifiers. So let's just talk about the analog inputs for starters. Analog to input, you can configure that as an AV bypass. So if you wanted to put this amplifier in your home theatre system and increase your two-channel performance but still have that one set of speakers, you can certainly do that. Now if you want to know more about AV bypass, we have a separate video about that. Please go ahead and watch that. It's really a great informative video if you are wanting to mix theatre and two-channel performance together. Moving on from that, the other inputs also allow you to do is change the input sensitivity as well, which is really cool. So some, let's say CD players or streamers output slightly different levels of gain. And having that flexibility to make that input less or more sensitive really allows you to get the right balance for your system. So little bits of flexibility there, I personally really value. One other thing that I think is a really cool trick, particularly in the phono stage, is once again, having the ability to change that sensitivity. If those other things weren't there, I could forgive it, but this particular feature is really handy. So many cartridges put out different voltages. Some are quite low in the moving magnet and then some are quite high. And what most manufacturers do is they play it safe and they set it somewhere in the middle, so it will still work on the lower outputs and it'll still work on the higher outputs. The problem with that is that not every record, or I should say every stylus or cartridge puts it in the middle, right? So you end up with a mismatch in volumes between your CD. You'll be playing CDs and it's quite loud, then you go to your records and it's quite low because there's not enough gain on that phono stage. So having that ability to adjust it, not only will get the volumes right, it'll actually make it sound a lot more dynamic and you'll get more quality out of it. So I applaud Roksan for making those changes and the flexibility and the gain in the phono stage. Something, once again, you don't normally get in an amplifier built in. It's normally something that's on outboard phono stages. Now another feature that I find particularly fascinating and I think really handy for the ability to do a future upgrade is the Roksan's ability to run high and low frequency cutoffs. Now, why have they done that? Now, hold on to your socks. This might sound a little confusing, but I'm going to try to break it all down for you. Most of you are probably familiar with pre and power amps. Well, essentially that's what they have done. You can use the Roksan integrated amp as a preamplifier feeding into a power amplifier, but it's a little bit more than that. What you can actually do is you can use the integrated amplifier and a power amplifier and use it in a bi-amping mode. So why would you do that? Well, what that would do is allow you to use the integrated to run the high frequencies on your set of speakers and the power amp to run your low frequencies, essentially bi-amping your speakers. Now, a lot of you out there have probably seen on the back of speakers there's two binding posts. And most people are like, why is there four? What are they actually for? They're for this specific cause. So you can run separate amplifiers for the highs and separate amplifiers for the lows. And as far as connectivity goes, how that would work is one set of speaker cables from the integrated amp, one set of speaker cables from the power amp, and they would go to their respective inputs, the high and lows. And then you would run a set of RCAs from the pre-outs on the back of the Caspian into the new Caspian, likely the new Caspian power amp. Okay, now let's talk about the actual unit itself. The chassis is really nicely made. It's a heavy aluminium casework. You've got a metal dial. That same dial allows you to navigate the menu, control the volume, and also choose between your inputs. And it's got haptic feedback, so it's a nice in-your-hand control there. Obviously, it comes with a remote as well, and that same remote, you can actually get into the menus and change all those settings that I was just talking about. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet, which I think I should, is there is two apps that you can use with this amplifier. There is the Maestro Unite app, which is what allows you to do some of those crossover settings, AV bypass mode, and subwoofer settings as well. And then you've got the BluOS as well. So this particular amplifier from its streaming platform uses the BluOS software, which is widely renowned for its functionality, its reliability, and flexibility. I think I can applaud them for doing that rather than going out and trying to, I suppose, create their own software. They've chosen to use a third party that is well established and a big company with lots of engineers. So there's less likely for things to go wrong with that BluOS operating system than a smaller company trying to implement their own. So many of you would have heard of Monitor Audio speakers in the past. There's probably good reason for that. They're an award-winning company and they've been making speakers for generations. But not as many of you would have heard of Roksan. They are essentially a smaller, more boutique electronics manufacturer that have been making amplifiers, CD players and turntables, but they've always sort of sat in the background. Now, that's not to say that their products weren't fantastic. They absolutely were. Their Black Series and their K3 Series won multiple Hi-Fi awards in a whole heap of different categories. But the problem with them, and well, if you could call it a problem, is that they weren't really able to scale up with today's technology, with the streaming and implementation of things like ARC and BluOS, all those things that I was talking to you about before. Now, what's changed? Well, Monitor Audio Group bought out Roksan. Hence why we're now seeing all those changes, because the Monitor Audio Group have their own engineers and technicians so they can implement this stuff into these products. Now, what does that mean for this pairing? Well, naturally, when they designed the Gold and when they designed Caspian, they did it in conjunction with each other. So to say that they sound fantastic together is a bit of an understatement. To describe the sound successfully to you, I couldn't just listen to that pairing alone. I had to hear it on other components. And the reason for that is when you are listening to certain items in isolation, you can sort of get a good gist of it, but you really don't have any relevance of where the sounds are sitting within the mix, whether, you know, the vocals are more forward or whether the drums are more punchy, for example. And when you change out those components, to a different set of speakers, it really highlights what is and isn't happening in the first set of speakers you're listening to, i.e. the Monitor Audio Golds. So what I did was mainly listen to the Caspian on the Golds, and then I bounced between the Golds and the Bowers and Wilkins so that I could convey to you the differences that I'm hearing in the combination and what sonic signatures from the Caspian are the same coming across in both speakers, sort of giving you an idea of the amplifier's sonic signature. I listened to a myriad of different tracks, everything from modern pop to folk to some funk, a whole heap of different options. But what I really found for me that really sort of split them apart is when I went to a more simplified set of tracks. And one of the first ones that I listened to was Adele's Go Easy On Me. And the reason for that is at the start of that track, there's some really nice piano tones. And when listening on the golds, they were really nicely balanced and weighted. You could sort of, hear the slam of the key, and as it rang out, it was all very much balanced. And then vocals come in, the piano sat within that really nicely. Now, in comparison, when I was listening to it on the Bowers, the piano was still there, but the notes sort of started and stopped a little quicker, maybe a little more congested in comparison. As far as the imaging concerned between the Caspian and the golds, it was rather wide. The music sort of hung right out to the far edges of the speaker, but really didn't go beyond the speakers. Center imaging was fantastic, however, it was really focused. And when listening to Adele, she wasn't in front of the speakers, but she was more sitting behind, but not necessarily quieter or recessed into the music. It was just deeper, which gave you a sense of listening to her on the stage. It sounded quite nice. I suppose the takeaways from it was the imaging was nice and tight and centered, yet deep, so it had a lot of depth to the overall sound stage, kind of like you're at a concert. On the Bowers, in comparison, the imaging was actually quite wide. If anything, it was maybe slightly wider than the golds, and still focused in the middle, but a little more veiled. It didn't have that sort of pinpoint accuracy, which you can get on other combinations with the Bowers. I have certainly heard that. But what it really did was grab that vocal and push it out in front of the speakers. So they were it was sitting into the room in the mix, and you could sort of really, what would be the right word for it? Probably, it was a bit more intense. Like she was sort of grabbing you by the neck saying, listen to me, so to speak. And what that did is, once again, put a highlight on the vocal rather than the instruments and things around it. Hence why I'm saying it's probably a really good combination for vocal-focused music. Moving on to the next track that we listened to, which was Uncle Lucius, Keep the Wolves Away, which is, I suppose, a folky country song. That one, once again, it's a reasonably simple song. There's not too much going on, but there is enough in the different frequencies to sort of highlight where those frequencies are getting portrayed in the mix and how forward they are or recessed they are. Now, on the golds, once again, it was beautifully layered. All the instruments sat in their own space, reasonably balanced together. It just sounded very natural, and to me, I just really loved the way that they were presented. The bass had a good solid thud to it, and the trailing notes of the bass were long, so not only could you hear the kick, but you could hear the decay of the kick slightly rolling off. The guitars, you could hear the strum and the sweetness of the tone of those strings all playing out really, really quite nicely. This track highlighted the tonal texture of the amplifier and speaker combination really well. Now, listening to it on the Bowers, once again, the same traits came through. The vocal was a little more forward. The kick was maybe a little bit more pronounced, so it had maybe a little more thud to it, but it wasn't as detailed. It didn't have the texture and the roll-off to it quite as much. The texture, though, that was the big one that I took away from that. The texture on Uncle Lucius's vocals with the Bowers was there, hence playing into the folk thing and that focus on the vocal. You could sort of hear a little bit more of the intensity in his voice. But overall, once again, in this particular setting, in this combination, I'll swap out a little bit of that texture in the vocal for the overall balance of the gold. So those are the main differences you hear on the speakers coming from the Roksan. But what is it that remains the same? Well, Not a lot, if I'm being honest with you, but there is one key thing that really we actually didn't even notice was a thing until we sort of thought about it in retrospect and then went back and listened again. And what that is the tonal characteristics. The tone of the vocal stays the same. The instruments tonally are the same. Yes, there might be more clarity within the instruments, or the vocal might be a little bit more forward in the mix, but it all sounds the same. The detail is still there. It's not fatiguing in either one of the speakers. It's detailed, yes, but it's on the right side of that where you can listen to a whole heap of different genres. Now, don't get me wrong. If you put on a garbage mix, both of these speakers on the Roksan are going to show you that it's a garbage mix. It's just what it is. But for the most part, on a lot of recordings, it was on that right side of detail and balance. And it's something that I quite like. It's engaging, it gets your foot tapping, and that's what you really want out of a system is to feel like you're getting involved with the music. So yeah, I suppose the Roksan's party trick is that it holds that tonality through the different speakers, and that's pretty cool without adding too much colour, if you like. So yeah, it's definitely an engaging listen. It's a little bit detailed, but on the right side of it. But most of all, it's just got this lovely tonality to it. As we stated earlier, we did try a different amplifier on these speakers as well, the Roksan SA35. It's a streaming amplifier. It's at the same sort of price point, and really it's a very close comparator to the Roksan Caspian. Now, when we were testing it, the big takeaways for us were mainly in a little bit more, I suppose, bottom end. There was maybe a smidge more of that, and not quite as much separation between the instruments. The vocals sat a little more forward, and maybe overall sort of just a little more heft to the mid-range frequency as well. So I suppose you could probably say overall maybe a little more warm, but with the vocal maybe a little more hot. So slight differences there between the two, not ground shaking differences, I suppose you'd say. What it did make me realise though, once again, is just how balanced the Caspian is. It's just such a beautifully layered sounding amplifier, and it's not until you compare it to a different other class leading amplifier that you go, oh, okay, I can now hear all those little subtle differences. And this is the importance of having products at similar price points to compare them to. Otherwise, you're just doing it in isolation, right? When you're dealing with class leading products like they are, a lot of them sound really nice, but it's good to be able to convey to you what the subtle differences are that you're going to get in these products. And we're happy to be able to do that and using the Roksan SA35 as an example, because it is a class-leading product and does sound fantastic. In fact, what I might suggest today, the big differences between the two might just come down to the pairing of the Caspian with the monitors, because they were designed in conjunction with each other. So naturally, it's such a beautiful pairing. So maybe what we'll do is do another video on the Roksan SA35 and try to find that right pairing so we can recommend that to you if the Roksan's more to your styling. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching again. I really hope that this video was helpful to you and can help you make a decision about these products. But of course, if you haven't come to the conclusion yet, please feel free to give us a call. You can do that and just ask for myself. My name's Nat. I'm happy to walk you through these and answer any questions you may have. Now, if you've got different equipment and you want to know how the Roksan might sound on that, or indeed how the monitor audio might sound on your gear, I'm happy to try out different products so I can let you know. All right, thanks again. Bye for now.